Good afternoon. Welcome to the second episode of Perspectives on Parkinson's Disease. My name is Adam Belfay, and I'm proud to say that I'm the Public Relations Director for the New England Parkinson's Ride. In the first part of this program, we discussed the disease of Parkinson's, some of its symptoms, and some possible medical and surgical interventions to lead towards a cure. This afternoon's program will focus on a very different aspect. It will focus on the bottom of my pyramid. You might wonder what the bottom of my pyramid stands for. It stands for two things, and that's family and determination. And if there is a story to be told about Parkinson's disease that involves family and determination, I have to say it is the story of the New England Parkinson's Ride. I'm very honored, once again, to have some wonderful guests with me to help tell that story, beginning immediately to my left with Edna Woods, who is the ride director for the New England Parkinson's Ride. To her left is Terry Woods, who's been a cyclist since the ride was founded in 2007. To her left is Deborah Holmquist, who was a cyclist since 2010 and will be doing her third ride coming up very, very soon. And on her other side, we have Dr. Regani, who is going to be a brand new cyclist this year at the 100-mile distance. And we won't intimidate him too much by telling you that he just got a bike a couple of weeks ago. So it could be a very interesting trip for him this year. And on his other side is Dr. Connor Moore, a well-known pediatrician in southern Maine, also a Parkinson's patient, who will be riding the 30-mile, if I remember correctly. The New England Parkinson's Ride has been around now for 7 years. Tell us its story. Tell us where it started, tell us why it started, and why a ride.
Well, when my 41-year-old son was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease 7 years ago, he was an avid cyclist, and so he wanted us to find a ride for Parkinson's disease, and there wasn't one, so we formed one. We affiliated ourselves with the Michael J. Fox Foundation to help us with the fundraising aspect of the ride. It has been a wonderful experience. The first year we had 35 cyclists who were mostly family and friends, and we raised $27,000. All the money raised by the cyclists goes to the Michael J. Fox Foundation for research, and each year we've grown about 100 people per year, so that last year we had 440 cyclists and raised over $200,000. It's an amazing event. Everyone loves it because it's so family-oriented. You can do some of these big rides like the Pan Mass Challenge and these MS rides, and it's very, you go out there and you cycle and you go home. They have a party at the end. But we have 10 rest stops where we have volunteers working, and they're people who care. And they are so happy to be there to serve these cyclists, and they're thanking the cyclists, and the cyclists are thanking them, and it's just a very happy experience. The routes are very nice. Some of them go along the shore, some of them go inland, but it's just a very good experience, and I've met so many wonderful people with Parkinson's disease and people who are supporting people with Parkinson's disease and people like yourself who have lost a loved one with the disease. It's just an awesome experience.
Terry, what could you add? What have your experiences been, both as a member of the fabled Woods clan and the actual ride itself?
It really is. It's probably the highlight of my year. Just so many people, of course, a lot of family members, friends. Chris is still so close with his college roommates, his high school friends, that we have so many people gathering in one place, and then we meet so many others that come every year. Susie from Kaufman from Chicago flies out here. We have people that come from New York that we've met, and we all get to talk and meet, and it's been, it's also to see people with Parkinson's being able to do something. They're working and raising money for something that they need too. So I feel like Chris being able to do something for his disease is a wonderful thing for him.
Deborah, your first New England Parkinson's ride, and we like to talk about this every year, was particularly challenging now 3 years ago, and you started on a very, very crisp, beautiful autumn morning, and then what happened?
Well, it was great until mile 30, and I fell on a brand new bike, saved the bike, still have the scars, and finished the ride, which I'm proud to say. It wasn't easy, but
I was there for that.
Yes,
Sorry
you
to drop
were.
in. She was a champ. She got up bleeding and all, wouldn't let anybody help her, and onward she went.
And one of our most charismatic riders, as I understand it, Vinnie Mandolini, took a look at you and said, "She's fine. Let's go."
Yes. And I might add, he was 70, and he had already passed me going up a hill at one point. So
That's depressing.
it was until he turned around and smiled and said some cheery good morning, and
Yeah.
you see the smile and you just love him. You know,
Yeah.
he's just very charismatic. And I thought, finally, somebody who I can hit the pavement with. Let's go. Everyone get on your bike and let's go.
Dr. Rigatti, as a transplant, I think, from Oregon, am I correct?
Born and raised in Oregon.
To Maine, and a surgeon, how did you find out about the ride? And your connection to why you'd want to do it is a little apparent to me, at least, but maybe you can talk about that as well.
No, it's a good question. I think through my trips over the last several months to Maine, one of the things that I think impressed me pretty dramatically was realizing there's a really rich network of support groups that already exists here, that there is a lot of, I think, opportunities that are fantastic for patients to interact with each other, and these support groups, I think, are a nice way to interact with the community for me. So to learn about patients, to learn about patient stories, to see the community from a different perspective. And it was fantastic timing to hear about the ride, and it was through the Michael J. Fox Foundation that I found one in the backyard. And so we put a team together.
And Dr. Moore, as not only a patient and a physician, where did your involvement in the ride come from? Had you always been a cyclist? Is that something you took up specifically for this event?
I was mostly a hiker and a runner, and I found out with the Parkinson's it's harder to do these things, and biking is much easier. You can go for a longer period of time. I only found out about the race 2 weeks before last year, so I only could ride the short distance. But I think Parkinson's patients do a lot better with biking. The interesting thing, as we were saying in the prior hour, was the number of people who donated on my behalf and who had relatives and friends with Parkinson's. It just came out like a shot that a lot of these people were giving money in memory of somebody who died of Parkinson's or friends who had it, and just how pervasive this problem is.
It's kind of been touched on, but if folks could talk about the fact that this ride is really not a ride, but instead 4 rides kind of rolled into one. Deborah, you do the 100. Dr. Moore, you'll do the 30. My family does the 10. Can you talk a little bit about how that works?
Well, when we started the ride, Chris had been involved 1 year in a Parkinson's ride that folded after a year, but it went from Revere Beach in Massachusetts to Old Orchard Beach. And it was so difficult because you had to have transportation from Revere Beach to bring everybody's supplies up to the end of the ride, and then when they finished the ride, they had to have transportation back to their cars in Massachusetts and all. So when that ride folded, Bob and I decided to do our own ride, and we felt it was better to do a loop because you could start and end at basically the same place, and you didn't have any transportation problems. So we came up to Old Orchard Beach because we had loved it up here when the other ride finished here. And the cycling paths and everything in Maine are so much better than they are in many of the other states. And so we started with a 30, a 50, and a 100, and basically all 3 of them went out to the first rest stop and then branched off. They start at different times and they branch off and go, and so that they'll all basically finish at the end at the pier around the same time. when we got talking to people, they,
Well,
no, they don't.
supposed to.
Supposed to finish at the same time.
Closing down when I
Right. But when we got talking to people, a lot of people were saying, oh, I wish there was something that we could do with families, because some of the people that were doing the 100-mile ride, their wife and children were there, waiting for them. And so we started a 10-mile ride that basically just circles through the residential area of Old Orchard Beach, and it's a very simple ride, but it's been a wonderful thing for many reasons. Last year we had an 88-year-old woman with Parkinson's disease that rode on a recumbent tricycle, and she did the 10-mile ride, and
Probably the most amazing thing I've ever seen in my life.
right, and she was just
Very
so
special
excited.
moment.
The woman could not walk. She was in a wheelchair, but she had been a cyclist her whole life, and she just pedaled automatically. It was almost amazing to watch. And so it has turned out to be a combination of something for everybody, for all levels of expertise. And it's
I'd like to add something. I'm sorry to interrupt.
That's okay.
One of the other things is young kids, they want to help. And it makes them feel good. And here's something they can do. And that I have a lot of friends that do it with their kids, and they are thrilled because they tell their friends, oh yeah, I just rode 10 miles to the Parkinson's ride. They are so proud of it. And it's an awesome thing to teach your child so young.
Absolutely. Now, as physicians, could either of you talk, Dr. Moore, you mentioned it, that the current thinking is that bicycling is particularly therapeutic for Parkinson's patients, which kind of flies in the face of what you might assume. When you have a neuromuscular disease that affects balance, one might assume that putting someone on a mobile set of wheels is not the best plan, but in fact what we're finding is the opposite. I don't know if you can talk about why that is.
They're doing some research now on riding on tandem bikes or riding on bikes where Parkinson's patients maintain a cadence of about 80 reps per minute. And there is something involving the neurological circuits where this may quiet tremor down for some time. And there's a lot of research into going on, exactly why this is. I belong to the medically oriented gym in South Portland. We're doing a study on tandem biking up there where the backseat driver is sort of cycle around by the front driver at this rate, and been some research all around the country about the benefits of biking. So it's not just a physical exercise, but there's something about the cadence at this particular level that may be beneficial as far as the motor symptoms. A lot of research being done.
And a lot of the other, my father never got overly involved in therapy, but he had looked into a couple of studies, and interestingly, things like singing. And as a theater program director, that one I understand completely, just in terms of the way you train vocalists to move their mouths in just overly dramatic ways. When you have a Parkinson's patient who isn't able or who is at a point where they can't easily move their mouth in a normal way, that makes complete sense. What are some of the other therapies that aren't necessarily medical that are being offered to patients that weren't offered, say, at the beginning of the ride?
That's a good question. I think I was impressed when I came here and learned that there are Parkinson's-oriented yoga programs, there's Parkinson's-oriented dancing programs, and those kinds of things make sense. Dancing, singing, cycling makes sense. When you think of it as this all these overlapping neural circuits, you have some that are preserved, and you're actually taking advantage of those that are well preserved. So the part of the brain that handles bicycling is different than the part of the brain that handles simple locomotion or walking. And so patients who have challenges with freezing and walking don't necessarily have the same challenges with dancing and cycling. And so it's a way to not just engage those parts of the brain, but also use them as tricks to apply back to real life. When you make your brain think, oh, this is just a dance move, well, you can use that kind of a thing to get back into a rhythm of walking again.
I remember my dad looking at some speech therapy options, and I had to chuckle because they really sound like theater teachers. Slower, louder, and bigger. And I tell Cass that all the time. Slow down, you're speaking too fast. Bring your volume up. Everything on stage has to be bigger, and when your tendency is to go smaller, I think it's just a natural extension of what you might do to help that type of situation. Now, Edna, one might assume that you would have enjoyed a retirement. However, that's not the case, and I want our viewers to understand you are the undisputed grand dame of the New England Parkinson's ride. Nothing happens on this ride without you knowing about it. You know everyone's stories. You knew my life story in about 10 minutes after I met you. Why is that? Why do you feel so passionate about this?
Well, I have met so many amazing people with Parkinson's disease. I started off doing this for Chris, but in the process, I have met so many amazing people that are fighting the fight and doing a brave job of it, and their families and their loved ones and their friends. First of all, I couldn't retire because I never worked.
Which means you probably worked harder at home than the average person
raised 7 children.
does.
I never worked for pay, so I couldn't retire. So when you can't retire, you find something else to do.
There you
If
go.
the world gives you lemons, you make lemonade, you know, so.
Terry, I would assume to us it's obvious, but could you explain to the viewers why you do the ride?
I do my ride for not only my husband, who has Parkinson's and has had it for 7 years, which the ride is for, but for everybody else. It's something that everybody should be giving back to others. That's what we're here on this earth for, to help others. And so this is my part.
And Deborah?
Well, the reason I started doing it and the reason why I continue to do it are very different. And I started riding because my dad rode his bike with his siblings on a different ride and passed away suddenly. And I never got a chance to ride with him. And I was pregnant well, anyway, that's another story. And so after he passed, I started riding pretty avidly and got to a point in my riding where I felt like a century was going to be a great challenge. And I didn't know about any. And your mom said, what about the Parkinson's ride? That's coming up in a couple weeks, and you could do 100 miles. And I thought, oh, if I can meet my personal challenge and do something for my uncle who was alive at the time, that's a win-win. So I joined, and I arrived that day, and I was doing it alone. And I was immediately scooped up by the Woods family, who didn't know me, never seen me before, and now I was talking with these people, and I was learning a little bit more about who was there and why they were there, and then my uncle showed up, who I was riding for, and I didn't expect him. And he gave me a hug and wished me off, and he had tears in his eyes, and I thought, oh my gosh, I had no idea that this would have such an effect. And then he was at the finish line, and when I came down the hill, I could see him at the bottom of the hill. And that whole ride down, it just kind of sunk into me that this was a lot bigger than me, that I wasn't doing it just because I wanted to do 100 anymore. It was something that I could do because others couldn't, because they were too sick or not here anymore, or it was because I got to create this memory with him that I'm lucky to have. And now every time I ride that hill at the end, he's at the bottom waiting for me, in spirit at least. And so to see all the people with Parkinson's who ride their bike and knowing that I can physically do it and not have ailments, there's absolutely no reason why I can't go out and support this cause. No reason.
I want to just say that the people with Parkinson's that ride, there's so many that volunteer too. It's their way, you know, some of them just can't ride, but they're there, and that's so important
Absolutely.
to acknowledge.
Absolutely. Dr. Moore, how does it affect you to be able to do something tangible to help not only yourself with the disease that you suffer from, but so many other people?
Yeah, actually, by dint of the fact that I practiced for 40 years in the area, I've still got a lot of friends, family, and former patients, who are now grandparents or great-grandparents in the area. And a lot of times they'll ask me, knowing what the disease that I have, you know, what can we do for you? And this is something very tangible. If you, something very easy to do, and you can go on Facebook and talk about it, and so it gives them it gives me and them a way to connect with each other, you know, after the years, and so it's a two-way street.
You actually segue me very nicely into talking about some details. We've said that there are 4 rides at the 10, the 30, the 50, and the 100, almost said meter. Don't know what that was about. I guess my science teacher background was coming out there. Mile distances. Can you explain the start times on those rides? And I think it's important to emphasize the location change and why that happened for the beginning of the ride this year.
Well, we always started at the Loranger Middle School on Saco Road in Old Orchard Beach. But the ride has become so big, and the parking was an issue, and there were soccer games going to be going on. It's like, we need to find a safer, bigger space. So we moved just down the street to the Old Orchard Beach High School. So all the rides will begin at the high school this year. The 100-milers start off at 7:30, so they need to be there an hour early. And then it's every hour and a half afterwards, 7:30, 9, 10:30, and 12. We have volunteers there that have breakfast for everybody. This Mandolini family, this Vinny's family, the mother has Parkinson's disease. And she bakes all these wonderful fresh breads for the start of the ride. And we provide all the food, coffee and juices and so forth to get everybody off on a good start.
On Friday nights too, we also.
On Friday night we have a pasta supper it's mostly people that have to come from a distance, that are staying overnight, and they need to get up the next morning and ride, so we give them their fix, their carb
Delicious.
fix. Yeah. And it's held at the Lindbergh's Landing at the end of the pier, and it's a wonderful time.
There's 2 seatings.
2 seatings. Go ahead.
At 5:30 to 7:30, and then the second one's at 8, and then basically they want us out of there by 10. But everybody's seeing everybody again for the first time, and it's a great gathering.
And you can pre-register, you sign up and get your numbers for your bike, and
get your little trinkets
get
that we
your
have
little
all
trinkets that we're giving out this year.
Get some-
And
Now, registration, sometimes you hear nightmare stories about how to register for a ride. How does registration for our ride work?
well, it's been a work in progress. We have combined ourselves with the Michael J. Fox Foundation, with Team Fox, which is the fundraising arm of the organization. We have our own website that you go on to anyparkinsonsride.com, and there's a place to click to register. There's a $25 registration fee, and then you go through and fill out the process. At the end of that time, there's a place where it says, if you're a returning Team Fox member from a previous year, you click here and that will take you through. The problem we have is that people have to remember their username and their password. And if you haven't written it down, then you have to go through this process of getting your new username and password. If you're a new cyclist and you click on, this is your first year with Team Fox, there's a $50 membership fee that's a once-in-a-lifetime fee, but then you can fundraise and have people donate by credit card. And this is all kept, it's recorded for you so that you can anytime click onto your name and it'll tell you who donated and how much they donated. And so it's a very good system. Some people are having problems traveling from one website to another, and we are working very hard to fix that, but it's a work in progress.
Excuse me. I think it's important to mention, correct me if my understanding is wrong, the minimum donation is $100, but that $50 for new riders membership to the Team Fox organization does count as the first 50, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, that was
Yes,
my
that's
understanding.
your first donation, and Team Fox will send you a T-shirt and some information about fundraising, etc.
About Parkinson's. They send stuff about Parkinson's,
Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're looking at Saturday, September 7th at, I almost said Loranger Middle School, at Old Orchard Beach High School.
Beach High School.
Beginning at 7:30 if you're going to do the 100 and going an hour and a half in intervals from there. We will accept you right until that very moment, won't we?
Yes.
So if you have a sudden urge to come ride 100 miles, and we have had some walk-in 100-milers over the years,
Wow.
That's
which
right.
always blows my mind, because when I roll out of bed on a Saturday and I'm thinking, what could I do today? The first thought I come up with is not, let's ride 100 miles. We'd be delighted to have you come down and participate. Now, Devra, I'm going to ask you, other than the advice of run, to give Dr. Regani, as a new 100-miler, some advice for the 30-mile mark. When he arrives at mile 30, can you tell him what you might think, or what you think he might do?
Don't drink from your bottle.
So if you need a drink of water, you can have it up to mile 29, and after mile 31, you're good to go. Does anyone have anything else? Go ahead.
I do. I want to say that this will be the 4th year I do this ride. And last year, I chose to do the 25-mile instead of the 100 because I had an aunt who really wanted to participate, and she didn't want to do it alone. And I said, I will ride whatever distance you're comfortable with if you do it. And so, absolutely. So she and I spent the day together riding. And this year, I have recruited another 5 people. And I just want to say that getting out there and doing it is a wonderful thing, and volunteering is wonderful, but fundraising requires numbers. You know, the volume, when it gets bigger, obviously brings in more money, and the goal is to try to find a cure. So if I can find 5 people, that's another $500, and you could find, 5 more people, and you could find, we all could just pull in to continue pulling in and making this family bigger. It's only going to help the organization to find a cure sooner. And recruitment is really easy. 10 miles, I know it sounds crazy to some, is really nothing. My son's going to do 10 miles. Your nephews do 10 miles. And it's a wonderful family activity. And the other thing is volunteers are needed. And I know a lot of companies in Maine are starting to focus on community givings. And employees get give time where they can volunteer to organizations and get paid for it. And don't forget this as an opportunity.
You actually mentioned that, and it jogged something in my memory. I forgot to mention that we kind of obtained the Holy Grail this year during the off-season in the form of a 501(c). Talk about the doors that new status, which if you're not familiar with a 501(c), has to do with tax deduction and the way the organization is looked at as a nonprofit. Talk about some of the options that might open for us down the road.
Well, it takes a lot of work to get sponsorship lists and know who to write to. And I've written to some people, companies, in the hopes that they would help us, and they declined, and so I'll never go to their store again. But it has helped us. We have a raffle this year that we were able to purchase a week in a villa in Tuscany for $2,000 because
Wow.
we had the it's a week for 4 and a villa in Tuscany. We've added a $2,000 cash prize with it to help pay for the travel, and the tickets are $100 a piece, and we're only selling $200.
And there's
200
no
tickets.
expiration on the week.
Oh, nice.
And there's 5 different villas you can pick from. And so you can go 10 years from now, you can go 4 years, you can go this year. It's all based on availability, and it's awesome. I just came back in April, and the people that we went with donated this, and it is a fabulous time. Beautiful.
Dr. Regani, as a new rider, I know that you're already in the process of roping some other folks in. If I heard that correctly from Edna, you're not coming alone. You're bringing some other folks.
I'm
Who do you
bringing
have
some
riding?
peer pressure with me.
You're bringing some.
Some peer pressure with
There
me.
you go.
Yeah.
How
Some
many
folks talking to me.
people do you anticipate riding on your team?
We're up to about 30.
Nice.
And it's been impressive how easy it is. There's a lot of enthusiasm for it from people who have been cyclists before to people who haven't. It's been easier than I would have expected. So people are excited for it.
Dr. Moore, who do you ride with, and how many do you ride alone at this point?
I'm just starting out recruiting from my old neighborhood, kids and parents who are from our neighborhood, and I'm going to put it on Facebook fairly soon. Got some connections at the medically oriented gym in South Portland, so I'm going to draw from hopefully from a lot of different areas.
Well, and as you said, the nice thing is it actually hits a very effective therapeutic line for these patients. So not only are they doing something to help the bigger picture of their disease, they're actually doing something for their own physical well-being. There's really no way that a patient loses by participating in the ride.
Sure.
I think we're just about at the end of our program. If anybody has anything they'd like to add before we wrap up.
Well, I want to thank you for all that you've done for our ride. You've been able to get us out there.
Well, I view my job as the easy one. I just am the mouthpiece, but
Yeah.
I appreciate your...
But you do a good job at it.
Well, thank you so much. I want to thank all of you. I want to thank Dr. Moore and Dr. Regani for coming this afternoon. Your expertise has been most helpful, and we will hopefully have the honor of your presence on September the 7th at Orchard Beach High School at whatever time you should choose to participate. If you missed any of this information, you can go to neparkinsonsride.com, where you will find all of the contact information, including ways that you can help directly, either through a financial donation or to get in touch with Edna directly. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we look forward to the next episode of Perspectives on Parkinson's Disease. I'm Adam Belfay. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you.